man, this is awesome.
Good point.
I love
You mean
to
there's
worship.
actually times where you don't play?
I'd say more than not.
Isn't that interesting? Just take note of that, guitar players out there. It's okay not to play sometimes.
And if you listen to the rhythm section, if you got a good bass player and a good drummer, a good rhythm section, that's the foundation. And so as a rhythm player, I'm part of the rhythm situation, keyboards, guitar, bass, and drums. I'll kind of listen to what the song is. If it's more of a guitar song, then maybe I'll probably add more guitar parts. If it's a keyboard song, you know, I'll kind of back off. You got to watch the keyboard player, because if he's playing a lot with his left hand, then he's playing really thick stuff in the low end. If that happens, then I'll go to my higher strings. If he's playing sparsely, then I know I can move to a lower register, play bigger chords, more open chords. And same with the acoustic guitar. If he's just kind of strumming lightly, then I know I can bring in a bigger sound. If he's definitely strumming hard, then I know to kind of find a spot and then really listen to the vocal, because the vocals are what people are focusing on when they're worshiping. If it breaks into a spontaneous moment where it's more music and that's where people are going, then you can, you know, you can kind of work with that. So there's nothing to replace listening. But you know, I've also made a lot of mistakes. I've full-on soloed when I shouldn't be, and it's a trial and error thing.
Right. So you've made mistakes, and it's important to have some grace on your guitar player as he's trying to figure this out. But I think when we were talking about sounds earlier, as a worship leader, I think it's important for me to know what sounds are available. You know, so it's kind of neat if you can work with one another, for me to know, you know, because I know some of Glenn's tones as a worship leader, sometimes I can suggest, hey, you know, what about that you know, tone that you do where it's kind of chorused out and it has that swirly thing on it, you know, and he'll go, oh yeah, this, and I'll say, hey, could you maybe do that on the chorus? So I think it's good to know what your electric guitar player has available. And also for the electric guitar player to maybe initiate that. Go to your worship leader and let them know, hey, come and check out my sounds, and I want to make sure that what I'm doing is supporting what you feel like we should be doing as a band. And again, if an electric guitar player has that sort of spiritual and relational attitude, sort of the humility to be a servant, and he's not offended if I suggest something to Glenn. I mean, I can't play the stuff that Glenn can play, but I may be able to communicate to him what I heard him do before and say, hey, could you do that thing that you did on that other song? I feel like that would work. And maybe in his mind, you know, he thinks that's a dumb idea, but he doesn't let me know that. Just with humility, he goes, well, okay, but, you know, there's another possibility here too. And then as a worship leader, I want to be open too. So there's this kind of preferring one another and coming together and coming up with the best sound.
One thing I thought was great was you brought in CDs, you know, and you said, man, I really like this sound. I think this would work on this song. And it helped me go, yeah, that's a great idea. I might not have thought of that.
Yeah, maybe you might try that as a worship leader. You may hear a song, and we've talked about this in some of our arranging classes, is if you're just starting out learning some of these contemporary songs, try to do it just like the record. Every person learning the part, the guitar guy learning that part, the bass player learning the bass part, keyboard player. Get used to that, listening, and you'll learn about arranging and about not being too busy. And you'll learn, again, the concept, which I think applies here as well, is less is more, right? That sometimes playing as little as possible is the right thing to do. It all depends. So, once you've kind of heard the tune and you've kind of, like Glenn said, he's kind of deciding whether he should be playing up here or down there, let's talk about some of those options that a electric guitar player has. You know, there's volume swell possibilities, there's chordal things, there's little, what we call chicken picking, you know, those kind of things. Let's talk about just the chord option. I know that if I'm playing this progression, for example, I'm in this position. Instead of Glenn playing exactly what I'm playing, a lot of times I find that he finds something on the upper string set. Notice he's on the upper string section. He's staying away from the bottom strings, because that would make it too muddy, too thick of a sound. Okay, another thing he could do, he could play those chords. Right there, he was arpeggiating those chords. But this time, why don't we try like a volume swell thing?
Okay.
So instead of actually coming up with a little picking pattern, he can kind of strike the chord and bring it in with a volume. So I'll play the same progression. And that works nice for maybe the intro, maybe the verse while there's singing going on. Now here comes the chorus, and he's going to step on his crunch tone now. Now it's a little bit heavier. Let's end on the C. Now let's say we go back to a verse. He goes back to clean now. Isn't that nice? Again, such a dynamic thing going on there, you know? Another thing that I've seen guitar players do a lot is sort of this target note thing, like certain notes that on that volume swell thing, it could be either a chord, but sometimes it might be a note, one note that fits in all those chords. So in this progression, I'm playing a G, a D over F sharp, an E minor 7, and a C2. Well, there's a D right there. That's the D note. So instead of always playing a chord, I've seen, you know, Glenn do this where he'll just kind of play around with that D note, or maybe a D and another note that's in those chords. They're called common tones. So check that out. I just want to try. I'm putting him on the spot here.
Well, in the idea, one thing I've found useful, especially in worship music, not really having heard the song and learning it on the spot, I'll listen and kind of hear the changes, and if you learn to sort of stay in the same position, you can make its flow smoother than jumping around the neck. And in that sequence, I can go. And that's a very slight move. And if you hear it in the example, it makes a lot of musical sense.
Yeah.
We can play it.
Yeah, sure.
Is really, it's nice. It's definitely
it is, and it's nice that, you know, as electric players, sometimes we think you have to play this whole big shape. So this big giant bar chord, but we're going to do this triad exercise, which was on the second volume 2 video for acoustic guitar, and we may repeat that exercise here just to kind of give you an idea that instead of playing this big beefy G chord here, or this chord here, or this chord here, just taking the upper part of those chords and accenting that, which is what Glenn was doing there. So I know you have a cool little triad exercise. You want to just show that?
Yeah, the triads on the top 3 strings, there's basically 3 triad shapes, and then they repeat once you get past the 12th fret or so. Taking a C shape, for example, you've got that shape, that, and then it repeats. And if you play the cycle of force, you would go to an F, to a B flat.
Cool, man. It's jazz, man.
Yeah.
I like that.
I need to practice that more.
That's cool.
But once you learn your shapes, you go through all the cycle of force, then you can kind of see all the shapes, and they sort of lay over each other. Like in that example. You've got your G shape, to D shape, to E minor shape, to C shape, all in one shape. underneath
So why don't you play
one
that
position.
this time, over that. Will be the second position. We'll see what happens there. 3, 4. Those triads again that you were playing. So there's your, what's the first shape?
It's
Is that a G?
G triad, D triad, E minor, you know, I mean, it's the top part of an E minor, which is again the G shape, and then the C shape, which is this. And if you look at it, it's a combination of the two.
It's nice. That's cool. That is a great exercise, that triad exercise. While you do that, and it's in your booklet, included in there, and it goes through the cycle of fourths, and if you set your metronome really slow, and while you do that, look at where the root of the chord is, and you'll accomplish a few things. You're working on your timing, you're learning the notes on the fretboard, and you're also learning where all your triads are, which you'll find that when we get into soloing later in this video, you'll find knowing where your triads are really important, and it'll help your solos be more melodic. So that's a great exercise. Go ahead. Go for it. Follow that on your own at home. Talked about mostly clean sounds and some clean tones, but one of the things that adds such emotion to songs is the power chord, the distorted power chord thing that comes in on choruses or certain parts of the song, and it just adds all this emotion. So I'll play a tune like Rock of Ages and just see, just to kind of see the kind of power chord things you use on that. So 3, 4. One more time, I'll sing a little bit. There's no rock, there's no God like our God. No other name worthy of all our praise. The rock of salvation cannot be moved. He's proven himself to be faithful and true. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. Rock of Ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of Ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of Ages, Jesus is the rock. There is no rock, there is no God like God. Okay. Now, the first thing I notice is that while I'm down here as an acoustic guitar player, you know, he starts up here, just to give it a little bit different texture. But there are times where he comes down in the same register that I'm in, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to get, it's not like wrong, you know, you don't have to always stay there the whole time. You have all these options. I mean, there's an A chord here, there's an A chord here, there's an A chord here, so they're all over the neck, and so a lot of times it's wherever he's closest to. And maybe the next time he gets to that section, I notice that he'll play, you know, a different shape or a different form of that particular chord. So that just gives it variety. Occasionally on this video, I want to take a closer look at certain exercises or concepts. So we're going to call that a closer look. And I want us to take a look at this power chord exercise and kind of slow it down a little bit and just really take a good look at what the shapes are. So there's our, starting on the G, if you're looking at your booklet, the exercise starts on the G and then goes, there's the next G, and then here's the next G. So I'm looking at the root. See, here's the root there, and here's the root. There's G, and then here's a root, and there's a G, the root. See, it's the first note of the chord, the fifth note. If it's a scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 and 8 are octaves, so you've got 1, 5. Okay, and that's a G5. And then there's our G, and there's our G. So the exercise would be G, G, G. There's our roots there, G. Okay, now we go to C. You can play that way, or, and you're only playing those 3 strings. 1, 2, 3. You're just playing these. You're not playing anything down here. And then G. So there's a C, and then another C. Okay, then we go to F. 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 See what's happening there? And then B flat. B flat. You might experiment, just play around with these a little bit like Glenn was doing. Just lift that finger off a little bit and mute it a little bit with your right hand. Okay, and then once we do B flat, then you then do the E flat. Which is kind of funny that it's right there, but there's an E flat. E flat, E flat, and then and so on. So just go through the exercise like that, slowly with a metronome. I hope this helps. Let's look at just a few examples. I mean, we've talked about the theory behind finding the part that fits the song. And just, I'd like Glenn to just do another example or two of power chords. Just sort of, I want you to see kind of how he's playing those and how he's fitting it into the song. So here's a song called Praise Adonai. I'll just do one time through for an intro. That again. Who's like him, the lion and the lamb, seated on the throne. Let's repeat that again. Mountains bow down, every ocean rolls to the Lord of hosts. Here's the chorus. Praise Adonai, from the rising of the sun. Bow down, every ocean rolls to the Lord of hosts. Chorus, you praise Adonai, from the rising of the sun to the end of every day. Praise Adonai, all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints. Big ending on the A minor here. Again, I think this kind of thing is really valuable, just watching a guy like Glenn play to these songs. I remember just hanging out, you know, watching bands as much as I could, going to the rehearsals and just hanging out and watching these good guitar players, and then going home that night and just practicing for days on maybe 1 or 2 ideas that I'd learned. Then I'd go back a week later and just kind of hang out and be a fly on the wall at their rehearsal. And you can learn a lot. So I just feel like playing some of these examples, like another song, we'll do a little bit of that, I See the Lord. And starts off a clean. It's a good example, again, of a clean thing. And then when he kicks into the chorus, it's going to have some power chords with some crunch on it. So. I see the Lord. He's seated on the throne of his throne. He's filling the heavens. I see the Lord. He is shining like the sun. His eyes full of fire. His voice like the water.